This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I am your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Tallulah Le Merle, who is an AI investor, advisor, and speaker. She is a partner at Fifth Era, where she leads the firm's AI strategy. Fifth Era now manages 8 investment vehicles with exposure to more than 80 unicorns through fund of funds and co-investments. She began her career as a management consultant advising FTSE 100 companies like Johnson & Johnson, Mars, HSBC, Unilever, and so on digital and data transformation, including AI strategy back when it was largely machine learning and big data. She later served as a fractional COO for AI scale-ups, working directly with founders at the heart of the ecosystem. Tallulah speaks frequently on the future of AI and investing at global conferences and panels, often with the lens of the humanities side of the technology equation and hope in the age of AI. She also hosts Fresh AI, the world's first fully AI-generated daily news podcast on artificial intelligence. Tallulah, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Steve. Looking forward to this conversation.
Let's start with a little context. So, tell me where you grew up, some of your experiences, and your university experience, and then you got into the corporate world. So, just kind of fill us in a little bit here.
Yeah. So I grew up mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, although my parents are British and French, and we have a very large family in the UK. So we kind of split our time. Growing up, I went to school very early on in France and in Spain and other parts of Europe, and then moved there full time 12 years ago when I did my undergraduate at Oxford, as you kindly mentioned in my bio. So
Yeah.
went over for that and then never, didn't leave the UK for the next 12 years. Well, UK and Europe, living in London, mostly a couple years in Paris. And but recently moved back to the Bay Area. So geographically, I'm back in the hub and center of innovation for various reasons, as you prefaced, my intersection with AI and technology world. But I started off as a consultant. So, I was living in London working with large corporates on digital and data transformation, helping them, really modernize in the way that they're engaging with their customers and trying to bring them into bring some cutting edge innovation to these very large establishments. But at some point in time, I mean, I loved consulting, and I always say it's a great platform to start a career. But at some point, especially when you are really immersed in the world of cutting edge innovation, I was like, I can't keep making decks about this. I want to be in the heart of it. So I left the firm and started working independently with AI scale-ups and growth companies. In London, there's a good ecosystem and teams spinning out, but the deeper I got into the world, it just made sense to be back on the West Coast. And that's when I took the partner hat and moved into the investment side of the equation, where I now sit. So that's kind of what the journey's been.
Okay. Sure. And some of that too, do you do fractional COO work too, as an executive, or is that in the position before?
Yeah, well, that's what I was doing for a number of years after I left consulting. So working
Okay.
independently and advising those AI companies as they start off as these incredible startups with the CEO, CTO team, and then they start to grow and they're like, oh man, there's a lot of operational, structure and setup we need to do as we scale. So I would come in as a fractional COO to do that. And I don't, there's still in with my partner hat, there's still a lot of kind of advisory and support that I provide to some of those companies, but not in such a formal capacity anymore.
Now, part of what you do now too, do you still do the events, the 40 plus events that you do?
So the gathering, I always
Hmm.
say hosting is a hobby. When people ask what my hobbies are, it's always been to host and gather. And for some time, I was formalizing that and really looking at ways to, in the world of business, the way we interact can get so transactional and very like, these big conferences you go to where we're just mostly sitting, passively listening to panels. We don't even have, you're not even really connecting with the person sitting next to you for the most part. When you do, you're reciting your CV. It's kind of this awkward dance. And I do love to find ways to bridge that. And maybe when we talk about the intersection of AI and human flourishing topics, I'll explain how that still comes to life, but it's never really something I did for work. It's just something I care deeply about. And I still MC and host for nonprofits I'm involved with on their, or whatever it may be. Yeah.
So, so that's not part of the firm that you're with now that you do as part of that position. This is something that you kind of a side hustle that you do on your own.
I mean, yeah, we're always gathering, even with, well, Fifth Era investment management firm that I'm now a partner at, where there's cool things we're doing all the time, salons with our VCs that we partner with or with the startups that we're looking at in this space. And we're gathering our investors and the broader ecosystem around interesting AI or frontier tech topics. So it still happens, but yeah.
Interesting. So now tell me a little bit about this Fresh AI podcast. Now, this is very interesting because it's totally generated by AI, but your voice is on it. So tell
It
me how it
is.
works and why you do it that way.
Yeah. We, when it comes to content and news about AI, it's very noisy. So, and people, I think, are kind of very saturated with everything they're hearing about these technology areas. So we wanted to cut through it and provide something that sort of distills all the daily news in 15 minutes or less. So yeah, it's fully AI generated. It sounds like me, but it's actually my AI twin. So basically there's three AI agents. One scans the news on a daily basis for the latest in AI. A second one writes a script based on that, short and concise, and sometimes throws in jokes, which is hilarious. They're such bad jokes. And the third delivers the podcast in my voice. And then we've sort of coded it to have a different theme each day that's of interest to people. So Monday is Meet the Unicorns. It talks about what all the big players are doing. Tuesday is Term Sheet Tuesday, where you look at investments, deal flow, activity in the venture capital world. Wednesday is Workforce Wednesday. So for people who are in enterprise or corporate roles or positions, it talks about how those industries are adopting AI. Thursday looks at policy polls Thursday, governance, regulation, some of the more, ethical and responsible AI considerations that I also really burn for. And Friday is Futurescape Friday, where we get a little more out there, all the mid to long term developments and horizons.
So do you have to edit those then when you send it to the AI machine, so to speak, and it comes back at you? Is there a lot of editing to do, or is it pretty much done?
No, it's pretty autonomous in
Hmm.
that sense. We obviously listen, and if there's anything off or sometimes it gets too opinionated and we want to avoid that. It has to be as fact and based as possible, right? So we
Yeah.
might scratch that or get it to revise a script in that instance, but otherwise, no.
Does that freak you out when you hear your voice come back at you and say, I didn't actually say that, but
We have good disclaimers in there. I would like for it to be, I feel like everyone has this issue with AIs, right? Is like it feels still impersonal. Maybe that's a good thing because you can distinguish, but we're trying to, I want to build some kind of humor and irreverence into it, a little bit more play.
yeah, that's really interesting. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what you're doing now with companies. So you are part of this firm, you go in and you invest in them, but it sounds like you also do some coaching and some helping them get things ready to scale up and so on. So tell us about that part of what you do now.
Yeah. I mean, my primary hat is as an investor in the AI space. So Fifth Era, we invest in frontier tech and I lead our AI strategy. So we find the best VCs to partner with who are investing in early stage AI. Um, AI is so becoming such a ubiquitous term. I'm sure everyone listening hears it constantly. There is a lot of hype, to be honest, and it's very noisy. And so knowing where to start if people want to invest is very difficult. And beyond that, there's a lot of fear, which is natural when we're moving into something that's relatively new in the inflection point we've reached. This technology has been around as long as the internet, but we're, you know, in a new era of its growth because of where we are with advanced compute capabilities. So people are worried. They're like, they're hearing it's going to take my job. It's going to fully disrupt this industry that I've known and loved and worked in my whole life. It's making me less intelligent. If I over rely on it, I'm going to become this like potato. Or it's not safe and secure. My data isn't secure. I don't trust, what that information is being used for. Or these macro fears about AI overpowering us and AI overlords and misalignment, runaway AI concerns, or geopolitical concerns about AI in the hands of certain political actors, or so there's all sorts of things, right? And alongside the invest side of the equation that I look at, I find myself really engaged in that conversation with people about AI and fear and, future trajectory for humanity and what it means. Like, how will we be? What will work mean in 5, 10 years' time? How will we interact with one another through this technology and outside of it? And so I do still work with corporate teams on that. I come in and I think a huge gap right now is AI literacy. I mean, understanding of the technology itself and what it is and what it can do outside of ChatGPT. People tend to understand those big foundation model players, but beyond that, they don't often have a good big picture. So helping bridge that gap in terms of the literacy. And then my biggest fear is that because of all the fears, which many are valid, and there's a lot of real risks of where we are today, but because of the fears, we have, there are people leaning out of this equation who we need to lean in right
Mm,
now. We need social scientists and policymakers and people in government and psychologists who understand the human condition, and they all need to be part of this conversation, which is right now very dominated by technologists
yeah.
sitting in
Well,
Silicon Valley,
Well, it seems like a lot of your emphasis, from what I gathered, was that, you're looking for, how this growth aligns in the AI world, but with human-centric values. So, how do you
Absolutely.
combine the two, or you're not combine, but, work together so that it's not just 100% technical, right?
Absolutely that. And for many reasons, you know, people already interact with name your favorite LL, ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever it is in a rather intimate way. But as we begin to use AI agents more and more, and they're making decisions on our behalf, imagine like Google just came out with Pixel 10, if anyone's familiar with it. So most of our mobile devices, we use the internet through the device. But in future, you'll be speaking to an agent who's then, doing things on your behalf, booking a flight to wherever you need to get next week. And as we do that, we will, that's a relatively intimate interaction, interaction and frequent interactions that we'll be having with this technology. So making sure that it's designed to be good for us, to be ethical, to be responsible, to not make inferences based on biased data, that the right guardrails are in place. Like all these things are already really critical, and there's very smart teams addressing them, but it's just, we're in a window right now where many trajectories are open to us, and it's will be dependent on how much we lean into the humanity side of the equation.
Well, we'll get into more of that for sure. In doing a little research on you for
Mhm.
this episode, you have a lot of credentials, and you're you're a fairly young professional, yet you have coaching degree, you have personal training certificate, your yoga teacher certificate, you speak French and Spanish as well as English. You're a musician, singing and playing the piano, and I see some beautiful guitars over your left shoulder in the background as well. Recreational sculling, you're a world traveler. You're doing a lot. You got a lot going on.
I think a lot of people have a lot going on, but we very much identify with like our day jobs. And unless you really get under the hood and ask people, you don't often get to that next level of all these things that light them up. I mean, you're sitting in your beautiful wine cellar and you have a guitar badge there. So it's like, when you make it a list, of course, it sounds, um, more extensive. Yeah, one thing I will say, especially the PT and the yoga and I'm really a passionate student and observer of humans, and I'm obsessed with human psychology and well-being, consciousness, and ancient wisdom topics. And so we sort of touch on it with this intersection of technology and humanity, but I spent a lot of time exploring that world to now be trying to almost bridge them in a
Yeah.
way.
Well,
Uh,
it's a great approach in the sense that, it's the tech world and you're dealing with AI and technology, yet it's very evident that you also put a lot of time and effort into the right brain things, so the psychology and the human centric things. So it's really interesting to me because uh, I think we need more of that. That's great because we do have to consider both. Just can't look at it from one angle.
yeah, it's exactly that. And I think, as I said, the world of technology is very saturated with technologists and engineers and great problem solvers, and that's wonderful. But actually, these worlds are converging. And, we've basically created a technology that is a mirror for us. And it's in a way we people talk about cognitive offloading, but we have designed a tool that does cognition better than we do. And it feels threatening because we spend all our time in the psyche and in the mind, and we're very identified with our intelligence and our ability to innovate. And so when there's a tool that does it better than us, we're like, well, what is a human then? What is the remit of the human if it's not, those things? But I think there's this great opportunity now. Like when you ask, yeah, what remains uniquely human in a future that's very AI enabled and driven? Well, it's that we're social creatures and we gather and we come together in community, and that's very, much part of our biology, going back to this point about gathering and hosting and communing, and that we have physical bodies that are having a somatic experience of the world. And so that's where this whole well-being um, approach and emphasis comes in. So I just see an opportunity to return us to some of those deeply human traits that we've waylaid slightly. Because we're very much, as I say, we spend all our time on screens, we're up in our minds, we really kind of worship at the altar of the brain, which isn't a bad thing. It's led to all of this innovation, this technological advancement. I mean, we've done incredible things, but we've lost other forms of intelligence too. I mean, empathy, intuition, connection with our physical bodies, somatic intelligence, some people call that ecological intelligence of the land, and being very connected with nature and sees it. So anyway, it creates this grand existential question, but it's sort of the meeting of the two worlds. And there's more and more of us, even in whether hubs like Silicon Valley or beyond, who straddle both worlds and are having that conversation.
Yeah, it's really intriguing to me too. And what you're doing now is you're a partner in this firm. You're doing that kind of work, yet you also have a personal web page, and so it's you're doing some personal branding as well. You're doing some things there. So tell me how those two connect and why do both.
The funny thing about a website is that as soon as you make it, it's obsolete almost, right? It's like we're such evolving, shifting humans that you create a snapshot of who you are at a point in time, and then the next day, a few months down the line, you're doing something very different. I would say it's pretty representative of my platform and this AI and humanity intersection we've been discussing. What's missing is the investor side of the equation, um, which is, yeah, I would say they're not separate, but in with my partner hat on, and when I'm thinking about investing in these technologies, there is an element of, short-term gain and profit for, our investors, and but my passion and the platform that's represented there is still really one that I'm trying to cultivate alongside it, because it's a rallying cry for humanists everywhere to lean in and see themselves as part of this AI evolution, whatever you want to call it.
So is probably a big question, and maybe we can break it down a little bit. But what's the secret to blending that, that personal well-being and into professional development? Because it's something that we need to do. It's something that I agree with you 100%. We need to think about and train in a way as well.
Yeah.
But they're different. So how do you blend the two together in your presentations or your coaching that you do?
Yeah, it's so true. For a long time, they've been very separate, which I'm not sure how good it is for us that, people show up to work with, and that's their professional life and persona. And I do think, you're in a different mode when you go to work, whatever your work may be. But there's kind of a lack of humanity. There's kind of a lack of human dignity in a lot of the work that we do, I would say. I mean, people who go, we spend all our time, we wake up and look at our small screen phone. We go to work and spend all day on a mid-sized screen laptop. And then we come home to relax and look at a bit, there's kind of, um, yeah, a lack of kind of authentic humanity in a lot of work environments. Um, and I've always been curious about bridging them. Um, and how can you, uh, how would I say it? Just encourage people to show up and with full potential, or find ways to kind of be expressing of that in their professional lives. Um, so that's been a red thread throughout a lot of what I've done.
It's really interesting to me because when you think about, how do you integrate things like spirituality and mindfulness, into the training that we do in leadership development programs or whatever it may be, because a lot of times that's, some people look at that as risky. Oh, don't go there,
Hmm.
that's, you're going to look a little too out there, a little, heebie-jeebie or whatever, but
Right.
yet you and I both, I'm sure would agree that understanding that about the people we work with and knowing where they come from with their perspectives and working together with that, we're going to communicate better and potentially create things at a higher level if we do know that and address those kind of things.
Yeah. These concepts have, feel, been chronically undervalued in work and professional contexts. And the issue is not with the method, it's with how it's presented. Like, a lot, when you talk about the world of well-being, spirituality, consciousness, exactly, people often think like woo woo and and it's not an issue with the content or the methods. It's that the way it's presented to people uses language that they can't relate to, or it's presented in a way that's very, and it's nothing against the practitioners or the people who are practiced in that space. It's just that their skill is in the practice, not in the communication of it. So they're, yeah, they will use language like, connect with this, energies, and the way it's presented, like people just get turned off. And
Yeah.
I understand that. So it's almost part of, what I think about is the translation. How do you translate? Because there's wonderful, like, know what, there's so much science and studies now on the benefits of meditation, for example, right? Just take one, and the effect on the brain, um, and the DMC, and, so no one's questioning that. It's just that it's a matter of translating it and meeting people where they're at with some of those concepts. So I feel very strongly about uplifting ancient wisdom onto modern platforms, and for modern time, bridging the gap, because there's centuries old wisdom. It's not an accident that often a practice that exists and has existed in one part of the world or in one culture, in one religion for centuries, has its counterpart in many other places in the world. It's like we were onto something. And we've forgotten a lot of that again with this overemphasis on kind of the left brain, what we can prove, what science can prove, et cetera. Um, but science is only ever catching up with reality, you know? And that's not, I love the method and the practice, and I'm a scientist myself and what I studied at Oxford, et cetera. But yeah, I
Do
think
you do you consider yourself a more of a right brain thinker or a left brain thinker?
um, I've never asked myself that question. For most of my career, probably left brain, and then it's only recently that I've stopped gaslighting myself about how deeply creative I am. And I'm sure many people can relate to that, right?
Yeah. Well, you must have definitely some right brain going on there with your music and your piano and your guitar playing and whatever. So you must get some real joy out of that. And tell me what does that do for you?
Our family was so musical. We're almost like the Von Trapps. I have four brothers, and we all grew up playing a lot of music, and sound and song is such a just beautiful force of connection, and we don't get a lot of it. Group song, unless you're part of a church or something and you sing together, or you go to a concert, but even then it's not like we're not singing as one. Um, and there's a lot of power in that. And again, I don't want to beat the horse about the ancient wisdom traditions, but it's like every culture and society going back in time ever had communal voice or shared, either they would chant or they would sing, and there was these rituals of doing that. Um, and at some point, I worked with this amazing sound practitioner helping her scale what she's doing, which is integration of AI in these topics uh, in planetarium settings, which was really interesting. But she does a lot of work with Johns Hopkins on the power of sound and the effect on the brain and the effect on the body, and with Yale on those topics as well, which is a really interesting emerging field. And it's so powerful. So, anyway, and as a result of all that, I started to return to playing the piano, the guitar, hosting open mics, and then that burgeoned into another side initiative, if you will, when we talk about gathering, which are one-day choirs. And they're secular, and we just come together and have a musical director do an arrangement of some pop song that everyone knows and loves, like I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston or Yellow by Coldplay. And you learn it in a couple hours, and then you sing together, and something really gets unlocked in those moments, I have to say.
Get into that a little deeper. So you're having this experience with people. Obviously, they're coming and singing together. There's some awkwardness in that, maybe some worry about judgment, so on. But when it comes together, what does that do to then open some doors?
Well, there's obviously, I mean, when you sing, there's something that's happening in your body anyway. Like if you start off your day by singing, you open up the vocal cords, whatever, but there's also this vibration that's um it because you're also controlling your breathing, it's sort of like, doing breath work or meditating, a similar type thing, right? Like it has an impact on your nervous system, it slows down your heart rate, etc. So there's all these immediate somatic effects. And then when you do it in a group setting also, where it's just informal and there's no stakes, and it's just, I don't know, there's something deeply human about it. We've always done it. As I say, if you look back at, like, we would always sing or chant, or there's examples of this everywhere you look. And so doing it again just feels like correct. It just feels like a thing humans should be doing. We should be getting together and singing more.
So help us kind of understand. Let's say, for instance, you have a client that you're working with, and their focus is AI, and they're doing all these innovative, creative things. How do you bring in the human component and to make sure you understand the human centric values and bring in that more, right side of the brain stuff. How do you give me a real example, can you, of a client, and this is what they're working on, and this is what I did in that space to try and get them to see it in a different way?
Well, I will answer that question, but I also need to be clear that my day focus right now is as an investor. So I'm
Right.
not day to day working with corporates or clients anymore
Okay.
for the most part. But with large enterprises and corporates at the moment, the big question they're asking themselves is who are, what is their role in 2, 3, 5 years' time because AI is disrupting everything. So they're thinking about how to embed it into the organization to cut out costs and improve their efficiency and productivity across any given function number of functions, and also to drive top line growth. So they're like so excited, they want to adopt all these new AI tools, et cetera. And the work with them is kind of twofold. One, it's almost reining in that very tech first excitement and getting them to think from the needs of their end customers, of their internal employees. Because the issue with technology, which is as tale as old as time, is that people get really excited about sexy tech and they spend all this money and then it doesn't get the adoption that they need it because there's not, it's not, they haven't thought about the need that it's actually serving or how it falls within the broader strategy. And then they get disillusioned and they're like, it didn't work, we give up. So it's kind of, it's flipping that and saying, what are the needs that you're addressing? What is the strategy? Where is this business going in the world of AI? And working from that backwards to then find the right tools that address the largest value pools and being kind of rigorous about it. And then with this human and part of the equation, it's like, as I mentioned, people are scared. So a huge part of the equation is bringing them along the change journey and articulating what it means for their roles, there's a real overemphasis on the jobs that will be disrupted and taken away. And not, maybe not overemphasis, it's a rightful emphasis, but AI will also, just like the internet, create hundreds of millions more jobs than it ever disrupted, right? It created entire new industries in social media and e-commerce when we're talking about the internet. And AI is poised to very much do the same. And even before that, it creates new hybrid human AI roles and career ladders and potential. But people need to be upskilled, and there's a capability gap and there's a literacy gap, and so bridging that and getting the leadership really aligned so they have a real strong cohesive message that they're feeding back into the organization, finding change champions within each function who are, you know, interested or engaging with AI already and can help create that change for the organization. Those are all of the sort of things. And then making sure that it's implemented responsibly and safely and it's interfacing with their existing software and systems and tools in a way that's safe, secure, with the right guardrails and the right governance around it. That's all goes to this kind of, yeah, how you deploy it and is it done in a human way and in a responsible way. So that's what I'd say to answer your immediate question. Now, I'm very much now on the invest side of the equation, but I'm thinking about this
Right.
all the time. Right now, the capital, the money, the funding is flowing into where the huge bulk of solutions are being built, which is efficiency and productivity solutions of AI and enterprise AI, right? Solutions for those corporates I was just talking about, because they're adopting rapidly right now.
Mhm.
But I'm really alongside that looking for exceptional investors, managers, opportunities that bridge these worlds we're talking about. Like who is investing, who is building AI solutions to keep us safe, to protect critical infrastructure from, foreign attacks or these other geopolitical concerns? Who is, um, you know, building AI for good solutions, looking at the emotional use cases of AI, because we'll be interacting with it in a much closer way in future and those sorts of things. So it's a long way of answering your question because I wanted to answer your actual question and then more
Sure.
like day to
Well,
day.
from the investment side, you're looking at companies to invest in. How important is it that you find companies that are first? Like the AI is everywhere, so I'm sure there's all kinds of ideas coming out. And are they are you interested? Have you got to be first to the game and develop this first, or is that not necessarily something that you're looking at from an investment perspective?
It's not necessarily about being first. I would say, we invest in the early stage. So we're looking at companies and also VCs that we partner with who are looking at companies that are pre-seed and seed and maybe A rounds. When it comes to things like enterprise AI, there's 10 or 20 teams at any given point building the same, building for pretty much the same use case.
Yeah.
So amongst those, it's not who came up with it first. It's a few things. It's who is the team and are the founders, are they the best person to build for this use case? Are they the best place? Do they have prior credentials or expertise? Do they have a deep passion? Are they, is it a co-founder duo that you really believe is best placed to solve for that particular pain point or need? And then with AI, many times it's sort of like, do they have access to proprietary data to work on, right? Because that's something that's kind of ring fenced and unique rather than, again, being first to it. Um, and then how adaptable is can they be to this world is evolving and changing so rapidly. So just knowing that they're setting themselves up well in that case. I would say it's those things rather than just it was the first person to have the idea.
What kind of brings us around to what we were talking about before is that I've often heard that startups don't fail because they run out of money or because their idea wasn't a good one. It's usually the people. So even though you come up with this great idea and you're going forward with your strategy, you have to have the right people in place to pull it off and make it happen. So I would assume that a lot of your of evaluation of a company, whether you're going to invest in it or not, is who's on the team, who's on board, how do they work together, and can they take it the long way?
Massively. Yeah. When we're doing direct investments in companies, that's absolutely one of the top criteria. A lot of our strategy though is what we'd call fund of funds for those who are familiar with the venture world. So we partner with VCs who are investing, who are then diligencing the companies directly themselves. And so we have a real diversified access because we'll say we partner with 10 or 15 AI VCs in this case. Each of them has 20 or 30 companies in their portfolio. So suddenly we have, two to 300 that we then have access to, and we collaborate very closely with them and follow those companies as they're growing, so that if they are seeing a lot of momentum or success, we can double down later on with them or support them in other ways as they grow.
This is obviously a broad topic and a lot of new things happening every day. So what haven't I touched on? What haven't we talked about that you'd really like to get into the program? So tell us what we need to know.
Well, we touched on so many topics. We talked about the power of singing and sound. We talked about AI and humanity and fear and the invest side and what corporates are doing. So I hope that your listeners enjoy these sort of fluid conversations touching on many disparate but somehow also connected points. And I hope that also gives others permission to be kind of multi-hyphenate in their own careers. And I always say, like, I for a long while I've had a portfolio career, whether it's because I work with multiple companies at once, and so that's its own portfolio when I was a fractional, or because that there's other elements of being that I keep alive somehow in a professional sense and kind of weave the worlds of professional and personal. And not everyone chooses to do that, and it doesn't probably feel good for everyone, but for those that it does, I think there's so much more space and opportunity to do that now because the way we work and we're remote and we're virtual and, gig economy is growing and more people, they just aren't subscribing to the former, corporate 9 to 5 get a job, stay in it for 20, 30 years. They want to build their own things. They want to have a podcast and be writing a book or, you know, all these things they're exploring and doing with their time or defining as work, quote unquote work for themselves, right? So,
Well, we've talked a lot about what you've done and prepared for this and what you're doing now. So let's look in the future a little bit. 2, 3 years down the road, how do you know when you're just living your dream and firing on all cylinders? What does that look like for you personally?
For me, it's seeing the growth of companies that are really at this human X AI nexus, whether it's again emotional use cases of AI, AI for good solutions, ethical and responsible AI solutions, secure AI solutions. I want to see that burgeoning, and I think it will be due to the people who really care about those needs leaning in. So it's not just like technologists and engineers coming out of great universities building something that has an immediate go to market and they can have a good quick exit. I want to see that shift. I want to see the capital shift, that more of those companies are getting funding, that the conversation about the human side of the AI equation is elevated to the highest levels, to the, you know, highest rooms in whether it's at a government or corporate levels. Um, that's what I want to see, and I want to be part of that wave. Whether it's just because I can see the vision and I consider myself both a technologist and a humanist, and I'm leaning in, but I want to be part of that, bring more people into it, talk about it, you know, provide a platform for companies already doing that at this stage. Um, So that's what I'd say. I am turning this talk and platform, the case for hope in the age of AI, which I've been giving, into a book format. Not that anyone ever needs to read it, but just to get it all down in one place. It's again, it's one of those things that will be obsolete in 6 months because it's very much for the moment we're in now, and that moment is evolving every day. Um, but that's what I'd say. That's what I want to see, and that's what I'm passionate about. Um, and I'll stay at that edge and intersection.
Is there a lot of money to be funded in this space? Is there a lot of money out there, or is it pretty competitive to get the good funding for these AI projects?
The one specifically, well, AI in general, or specifically
Yeah,
one.
just I mean, it seems like that's all you hear about now is AI, and so
Yeah,
investors are looking. If you don't have an AI component, they might not even be interested. Yet
yeah.
there's only so much money, and there's concerns about the economy and everything that's going on. So, what's the world of investing in AI like right now? Is there a lot of money out there to be had?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was 50% of VC dollars in the first half of 2025 went to AI startups. I think it's like 160 billion or something. So there's a huge amount of capital flowing into that space, and every company's AI company, every VC will say they're an AI VC. So it's noisy. I think that, there's been a lot of recent news about, is it a bubble and will the bubble, all these sorts of things. So you may have a little bit of a cool down, but the fact of the matter is that the foundations have been built. They have been being built since the 50s, with neural networks and, early commercial use case of AI with Siri and Alexa in the 2000s. It's like it's been building for a long time. So it doesn't change the transformative potential. It's just in the short term things may change and some of the tourist capital may, um, well, they say tourist, I guess that's a disparaging way of talking about it, but I think the short answer to your question is yes, there's a lot of capital and there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of eyes on it.
So, when you want to get into your Zen state, do you go for the sit down at the piano, or do you pick up the guitar?
Oh, the piano.
Okay.
I could go sit there and play for hours and just lose track of time. And I'm not that great, by the way, which it doesn't, it's not about that, but um, that is definitely my meditative practice. Are
Yeah.
you a guitar person?
I am. I play the guitar for a long time, but I'm the same way. It's for as long as I've played, I should be a lot better than I am, but I do it, strictly for pleasure and just chill out. And so it's something I love to do. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think there's any should. It's like, let's, permission as of this podcast that people can be bad, fine at something for life. And that's great because you're
Yeah.
getting something else out of it versus like,
Trying to
having
make a
to be
living.
an expert. What's your genre though?
Oh, kind of the singer-songwriter stuff,
Mm.
I play acoustic guitar and So that, I love new music as well as some of the old classic people as well, but just that, a great acoustic sound with, really meaningful lyrics, speaks to me.
I love that. Any particular artist that you?
Oh gosh. Well, going way back, I age
I'm
myself here.
interviewing you now for this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So I've learned a lot and tried to emulate a lot of James Taylor type of stuff.
Mm,
But currently Brandy Carlisle is kind of a local hero up in our neighborhood up here, and she's amazing. And there's just it seems like there's so much talent out there. It would be, thank God I'm not trying to make a living at it, because I think very few people can really do that well. But it's so great to hear somebody that really has their craft down, and
yeah.
not only moves themselves in a way, but moves so many other people. That's a real gift.
Yeah. Well, your voice, do you sing? Because your voice sounds like it has such a nice texture and tone. No wonder
Thank
you're doing a podcast.
you. Well, I try and sing. Yes, I do sing. So again, not trying to be a professional about it, but I love to do it, and friends and family can coax me into that pretty easily. So yeah.
So I should have asked you about your thoughts on power of sound. And I mean, you're clearly getting something out of it personally, but do you have thoughts on any of that that we explored?
Well, a lot of what I do is help people with leadership training and skills and things of that sort. And I think being able to, number one, speak well and communicate, but understanding what that communication is, and just being able to have that intuition of who people are and how they look at things, and how you talk, what language you use that you can resonate with them. And I think understanding people in a deep way makes that a lot more effective than just
Mm-hmm.
do everything in one way. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time on helping people see that through personality types, and just trying to listen probably more than you talk. But then when you talk, you got to make it stick. So.
Yeah. Yep. Completely.
At this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. So that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Um, I think, and I'm encouraged to see that more and more leaders, I guess I would say, are just showing up in a very authentic way. Like
Mhm.
authentic leadership is really having its moment. And that people aren't trying to, what I mean by that is people aren't trying to emulate what they think a leader should look like, or that it should be this kind of extroverted, powerful presence, or that it should be this, you know, quieter, but when you do talk, has all this gravitas, all these ways we thought leadership looked. I feel like
Yeah,
that mold is really being broken. And there is an authenticity movement, whether you like it or not, you even see it in politics, you see it all over the place, just people
yeah.
showing up as they are, speaking plainly, about what matters to them. And I find that very encouraging because your most powerful, impactful leader self is also the one that's most grounded in your authenticity. Um,
And people know that. They can feel that. I did interview a singer-songwriter on this program, and one of the things that she said to me I thought was really true, because if you think about it, you can see it. There are very talented people with great voices and maybe really great musical chops, but they perform, and it's a performance, and
right,
it's good and everybody likes it. But then every once in a while, there's somebody who just cuts you to the core, and
right.
that authenticity, and they feel it, and it just exudes out of them. To me, that's a different experience. And so I think you can do the same thing in leadership, that if you can get to that level with people that you lead, and people in your company, and people that are helping you get to where you want to go, I just think you can get to a higher level than if you just perform it. If you just come
Yeah.
out, I need to do this and I should do this, and so I'll do it. But it's somebody that has what you just said, that authenticity, that I think is really key.
Which will look different for everyone, but it's so true. It's like when you come across someone who's deeply authentic and in their own integrity, you just feel it. Like
Yeah.
the energy doesn't lie, and you can feel that they're so aligned, and you immediately have a sense of trust and a sense of almost respect for them showing up fully in alignment with whatever they have going on. And I think that I guess it's not even a word of advice, but it's promising because then everyone has access to it. Like you don't need to chase to become this version of leadership. It's like when you tap into the well of yourself, that will become its own sustainable force to drive you into success in whatever you're doing.
100%. And I think people get uncomfortable when you talk about it that way sometimes because they think, oh, well, you're teaching somebody to do that. I don't think it's really teaching. I think you're helping them find a way to let it come out of them and be comfortable with that space as opposed to giving them some formula that this is how you do it and this is how it comes across.
Yeah.
Because if it is a formula, people will see through it.
I love that you're saying that because I agree. We're so oversaturated with external input and advice about how we should, what makes you successful or what makes you a healthy human and these things you should do and these formulas. And it so loses the personal nuance that for every single person, it's going to be completely different. So the only like coaches that I trust, and it sounds like you're one of those in terms of your leadership coaching, is like those who almost their job is to tap you into what works for you and get you in touch with your own intuition about it. And then they're done. Like they almost make themselves obsolete because they've given you the gift of finding that within yourself that you don't need to listen to, they almost have like an exit strategy for themselves in their work with you.
Absolutely. Well, we've heard it before, and I think it's very true that some of the best leaders are the ones that create organizations where if they're gone and they're not there, it continues on just as strong as if they weren't there. And some
Yeah.
people may look at that as a weakness. Well, gee, they weren't that important. It's no, you've created systems and you've identified people that can carry it forward. And if you do it well, you're needed less.
Yeah, my definition of a leader is not someone there's no like hierarchy in being a leader. It's like amongst a group of people, the leader is just the one who's great at getting the genius out of all those other people around the table,
Yeah.
and that they themselves are not the expert in any given one area. In fact, there's people who are far better than them at any individual skill or subject, but they are just good at getting the genius out of that group and pointing it in a focused direction. And
Yeah.
that's it. But without them, they'll just find another person who's great at that, and all the rest of that human capital and intelligence goes nowhere.
Couldn't agree more. Well, Tallulah, this has been a real pleasure. You've got a lot of great things going on. I love just sitting and chatting with you, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more I could learn. So thanks for taking the time today and sitting down with us. And it sounds like you're doing exciting things.
Thank you so much.
Take care, and hopefully maybe we'll run into each other down the road one of these days.
I'm sure we will.
Okay, bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.